August 28th, we thank God for the life and the confession of faith of St. Augustine of Hippo. As we learned yesterday in reflecting on the life of Monica, Augustine's mother, Augustine's younger years were full of licentious living, seeking the pleasures and treasures of this world, and wanting very little to do with Christ and his church. Augustine devoted his early life to learning the art of rhetoric, being able to debate and speak persuasively. And much of Augustine's rhetoric used ancient Greek philosophy as a way to speak against and disprove Christianity. But through the faithful and persistent prayer of his mother, Monica, and through the pastoral care and teaching of St. Ambrose, Augustine became convinced that the arguments against Christianity that he had been using were indeed false arguments, and the truth of Christianity began to penetrate Augustine's soul. Ambrose baptized Augustine and mentored him to become a fellow pastor in Christ's church. Now, Augustine would use his skills in rhetoric and persuasive speech to preach the gospel of Christ and also to write about him. Augustine wrote volumes in which he argued for the doctrine of salvation by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. Augustine's most famous writings were his own Confessions, an autobiographical memoir of his life and conversion to Christianity, and also his work, The City of God, where Augustine encourages Christians living under Roman persecution to look forward to a new kingdom prepared before them by their own Father in heaven. Almost 1,200 years after Augustine's life, a young man named Martin Luther would become a monk in the church, a monk who was in the Augustinian order. Martin Luther would become very familiar with Augustine's teachings and would restore them to the forefront of Christian thinking and doctrine. When we think about church history and what it means for us to be Lutheran Christians, I often think about who would be on the Mount Rushmore of the Lutheran Church. Now, Augustine was not a Lutheran, to be sure. He predated the Lutheran Church by 1,200 years. But Augustine's doctrine and influence on the Lutheran Church cannot be overstated. He was the doctor of grace, who taught us that we are saved not by our works, but by God's grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. And so today, August 28th, we do thank God for providing ministers of the gospel in all times and in all places. And we thank God for calling St. Augustine of Hippo to be such a teacher, even to us.